Have you ever walked into a negotiation feeling like everything was on the line? It could have been about a salary increase, a promotion, or maybe even a major deal for your company. Negotiations can be daunting, but they don't have to be. Today, I'm going to show you how to approach negotiations as an art form by combining strategy, psychology, and leadership to get you the outcome that you desire. Let's start with the foundations. The first key is to understand your BATNA. The BATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What that basically is your safety net, so your backup plan. So for instance, say you are negotiating for a higher salary. You could have a backup plan of taking a competitive offer, or just continuing to work in your current position with your current pay while you look for other positions. Knowing and understanding your BATNA will help give you confidence, and confidence is power when it comes to negotiations. Now I want to talk about active listening. Far too often when we are negotiating, we are just thinking about what we want to say as opposed to really listening to understand the other party. One of the greatest leaders I've ever worked for once told me that we're born with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I always try to keep that in mind when I am negotiating. Active listening will allow us to truly understand what each party wants in the negotiation, which will allow us to come up with a solution that is beneficial to everybody. The last foundation I want to talk about is developing a win-win mindset. So basically, when you are in negotiations, a lot of people think it's about getting one up on the other party or pulling one over on the other party, getting what they want at the expense of the other party, when in reality, we can almost always find a win-win situation. Having this win-win mindset will help us to make sure that everyone walks away from the negotiation feeling satisfied and not feeling like they lost. Negotiation is as much about psychology as it is about strategy. One psychological tool is called anchoring. That is saying that a person's judgment is influenced by the first reference point, which is called the anchor. And in a lot of cases, that's going to be a number. For instance, when I was negotiating a salary increase, I wanted $10,000, but I went in asking for $20,000. After a little negotiation, talking about current salaries for my position, brought to the table everything that I've accomplished for my company, and I ended up walking away with a $12,000 raise. This is where anchoring really comes in handy because you can start way higher than you actually want. One thing to remember is you have to be realistic. If you're not realistic with your anchor point, then it's not going to work. The next psychological tool is called reciprocity, which really just means people like to return favors. So if you do something for them, they are more likely to be on your side of a negotiation. For instance, at one job, I was negotiating for a flexible work schedule. So before I actually went into that, I offered to take on more responsibility. By taking on this additional responsibility or doing a favor for my boss, it made it much easier for him to agree to my flexible schedule. And let's not underestimate the power of emotional intelligence. At one of my jobs, I wanted to present a new project idea to my supervisor, scheduled a meeting. I was very excited for this. This project I wanted to do was going to make a massive impact on the company. But I walked into the meeting, my boss seemed super somber, super stressed, and just didn't seem like himself. So rather than jumping into my discussion, I simply asked if everything was okay, asked if there was anything I could help solve for him, and I asked if this was even a good time to have this meeting or if he would like to reschedule it. That simple act of kindness, just acknowledging his feelings, changed the tone of the whole conversation. We did end up having the meeting, we did approve my project, and it did make a huge, huge difference of $100,000 a year savings. Now let's talk about what sets executive level negotiations apart from everyday negotiations. At the executive level, stakes are higher, deals are more complex, and relationships are absolutely critical. Here is where leadership comes in. When I was negotiating for raises for my entire development team, I was faced with pushback from the finance department. They didn't think we had the budget for it, so they were very concerned. Instead of pushing my agenda, I just reframed the conversation. I turned it into a discussion of what we can do for the developers to ensure that they don't go looking for employment elsewhere. What we ended up coming up with is a slightly smaller raise than I had asked, but a few extra days of vacation time for each of them. Overall, it saved a little bit of money for the company, all the employees were very happy with it, and no one complained, so it was a win-win. High-stakes negotiations, like those at the executive level, also require composure under pressure. Imagine asking for a significant raise, like 20%. Instead of just rushing to justify that number, you should pause. Just let the silence sit. Silence can be a powerful tool, and it encourages the other party to fill the gap. And this will often let you know what they're thinking before you actually even discuss it. Now let's just discuss a few tips for negotiations. First, make sure you're prepared. You should be researching the industry standards, you should be knowing your company's financial health, and you need to make sure you have all of your own accomplishments written down so that you can pull those up when needed. You should be walking into this negotiation with all of the data you can have. Second, you should ask open-ended questions. For example, you could ask, what would make this work? Or what can we do to make this happen? Asking open-ended questions encourages collaboration and quite often will lead to discovery of new information. And the last tip I have for you today is to practice silence. I have used silence in a lot of negotiations, and 90% of the time for me, the other person will end up breaking the silence, and more often than not, it ends up ending favorably for me. For instance, at one job, I was negotiating remote work as opposed to in-office work. I simply said what I wanted, gave my information about why I thought it would be beneficial to have me working remotely, and then I said absolutely nothing. I just sat there. The uncomfortable silence, yes, uncomfortable, yes, effective. My boss ended up breaking the silence by just agreeing to exactly what I had said. And just as a final wrap-up, let's just remind ourselves of these key things. First, negotiation is an art that combines strategy, psychology, and leadership towards one common goal. Whether you're asking for a raise, extra vacation time, or trying to close a great deal for your company, these techniques can help you be successful. Remember, the best negotiators don't just talk, they listen. Remember, 2 ears, 1 mouth. They don't just demand, they inspire. They don't just react, they strategize. So next time you walk into a negotiation, trust your preparation, focus on creating value for both sides, and lead with integrity. Thank you so much for watching today. If you would like to read some more about this subject, I will have a slide at the end of this video that will have some of my references in it. I will also throw links to those in the video's description.